Okay, Colleen, this is the linear spine flexion machine by SuperSlow Systems, and it is originally a machine to work the abdominals. However, it is also working for buttocks and hamstrings. What I want you to do is to step in here with your left foot. Straddle over with the other foot and stand right like that, and stand just like this. Okay, now put your feet out near the white area and sit with your knees wide so that you clear those rollers. Bring your knees up and then onto the rollers. And let me see what's going on here. Bring those knees on down a little bit. I would like them to be in that second valley. And I'm going to bring this heel lift up just a little bit. Now, this heel lift, this is a prototype machine, and the heel lift is not on the production machine. It's been eliminated. But in this one, we deal with it, and instead of having your foot, in one sense, on the top of the heel lift, I want you to think of it as being against the front of it. That is about right. Now, we need to perform a little test. And the test is whether or not we're going to hurt you by how far we make your back extend. I'll say it another way. How far can we extend your back before it becomes uncomfortable? Now, put your hands on this upper third rung. We say third because coming from the body, 1, 2, 3. Straighten your arms, and I want to look at where you are. Rick, I want you to stand back on about this level with the lens. So squat on down. What I'm looking for here is a right angle with her shoulder and about a right angle with her hip. And that is about right. Now note that if I draw a line between her shoulder and her hip, this line is either vertical or leaning back a little bit. And my bias with using this machine is that I would prefer her not to be that way, either vertical or leaning a little forward. So put your hands on the next rungs. I think I like that better. Note the placement of the back pad on the subject's back. I often refer to this as the plunger. Now, generally speaking, we want to put this back pad approximately halfway between the shoulder joint and the hip joint. And that's not an exact thing. Realize that originally it was a natural conception just to put a rounded pad into the small of the back a little lower than halfway, but that's not really where we want it, as we found. That rides too much up on the sacrum, and of course if you get it too high, it's going to be too much on the scapulus. Just to start off with though, just getting it in the ballpark, place it halfway between the shoulders and the hips. Now, once you've done that, you may want to adjust it a little bit. Realize that if you lower the seat, this back pad is going to be higher on the subject's back, and vice versa. And you may need to move it up a half inch or down a half inch. Maybe the upper or lower edge is impinging against some bony prominence. Perhaps you've got one of the edges pinching a roll of flesh, skin, clothing, whatever. But after some trial and error, you'll know where to put it. Now, bend your elbows and lean forward, and we will do that test. And this is merely a test. But we have to do this test in order to locate your starting position. Right, I'm moving this to some arbitrary position here, and I want you to slowly straighten your arms. let your back relax and bend around the seat head. Do you have any problem with that? Does it hurt you?
No, it's not hurting.
There's pressure, of course.
Yes.
It might even feel good, I don't know. To many people it does. Now, lean forward. We'll take another ½ inch. This position indicator on this crank has a resolution of 50 units to the inch. We're going to go 25. Slowly straighten your arms again. Always do this slowly, because we don't want to just ram your back into extension, even once we know where it is supposed to be. You having trouble straightening those arms?
Yes.
Okay, does that hurt you?
It's not hurting, but it's
Really, really tight, huh?
really tight.
Okay, well, we could probably tolerate this, but let's back off, at least for this first time. Let's go back a ¼ inch. What do you think of that? You can tell the difference in that, can't you?
Yes.
Okay, I like that. Sounds good to me. Now, lean forward one more time. I'm going to reset the weight. Now, I'm going to give you a resistance of about 60. I would normally start someone at 50. If you make it too heavy the first time, they have quite an aversion to just the pressure on them. But if you make it too light, and I know you're fairly strong, and if you make it too light, it's also difficult to control some of the things we want to do. So we're going to start with this. Looking straight ahead, I want you to begin to push your middle back straight to the rear. As you do, your chest will slump, your head and neck will flex, your pelvis will flex upward, and as you do that, lean with the heels of your hands forward onto these rungs. Actually lean forward, more. Actually put some pressure on the heels of the hands. That must come first. Okay, now you have produced a horizontal stroke as I'm reading off of this scale, and from time to time come up here, Rick, and note the scale. Right here, this is, she's moving 8 inches on the first one. Now let it come back down, and I'll give you some more corners as you go. Barely touch, barely start another one. Now, when you get way back into that fully trunk flexed position, I want you to pretend you're humping your back like a Halloween cat at the moon. Also, when you're in this position, I want you to pretend that this moving arm has been removed from your back. I want you to mostly think about touching your sternum down to your pubic bone and your pubic bone up to your sternum. Forget about the machine. If I could take it away from you or off your back, I would have just let you congest and squeeze against your own flesh. Note that I permitted Colleen in this scene to turn her head, making eye contact with me. Realize again that we want to minimize any eye contact or rotation of the head and keep our gaze, our countenance, our direction straight ahead, because even though we do not have any direct loading upon the cervical spine in this exercise, we do have tension. We're bracing with the arms. We have some inadvertent tension through the cervical spine, and we would like to minimize this by looking straight ahead at all times. Barely start another. Everything I've said notwithstanding, get into this position and think about just reaching into your tummy with your mind, trying to find something to tighten up in there. You probably are starting to feel your buttocks as well. Do you?
Yes.
And note that you can still breathe, but you can't breathe very deeply. You got everything tightened up in that midsection. Keep going. Good. Now, Are you focused on that scale there, Rick? Now, what I would do here is realize that as you're accustomed to the machine and the weight gets approximately correct, you're going to lose a little bit of stroke. The first time you use the machine, you might get 8 inches of stroke. The second time, even if we raise the weight, since you've learned how to do this, you may get a little more stroke. And as I continue to add resistance to you, you may maintain that and then eventually reduce stroke a little bit. Now, if you reduce stroke 1/4 of an inch, as I catch up to you in the resistance, that might be acceptable. You'll probably regain that stroke. And even if you don't, that's not a big deal, because as the more resistance I load onto you, the more you and the materials of the machine compress. But if I were to add 5% increase in resistance and you were to lose an 1.5 inches of your stroke, well, that is not acceptable. Okay? Now, you're starting to come off the heels of your hands a little bit. Now, you want to lean onto those heels of your hands all the time, consciously. That comes first. I want to say more about leaning onto the hands. It is possible that you maintain the heel of your hands on the rungs as you flex the spine, but by gripping, by holding on, by squeezing your hands. This is not desirable. We want to maintain the heels of the hands on the rungs by leaning onto the hands. Now, this is subtle. The reason is that the body attitude and the muscles that are emphasized are totally different when comparing those two situations. When you hold by gripping to those rungs, you will have a completely different attitude with the muscular structures that we're trying to address than if you lean onto the heels of the hands. So make sure you do the latter, not the former. When you're right here and you'd like to take the carriage a little further, your mind can take over and think about, well, I could go a little further if my hands came off. That's like the old adage of chopping off one end of your blanket that's sewing on the other end, and you can go further, and it's not really longer. And it changes an attitude within the body. What the actual stabilizing and attitude and muscles that you want to work have actually altered if you do that. So you want to stay leaned onto your hands. Now, you don't want to lean onto the hands so far or so hard that you jam your elbows or jam your shoulders. And one more consideration is your neck. As you flex the trunk, you want to let the head and neck flex too. Everything, head, neck, trunk, pelvis, is curling into a soft letter C. The key word here is let the head flex. Do not force your head down. We're letting your head flex to relieve tension or minimize tension. But if you force your head down, you will cause tension. Do just one more. This becomes an overall body experience. You can, in the right way, fatigue the whole body, almost like a leg press or a squat at times. Now, unload. Now to exit, I want you to put your knees apart, feet down. Then stand straight up. Do not try to turn at all. Now I want you to move your feet back just a little bit. Pivot to the right on the balls of your feet. To the right, to the right. Then step out by dragging your left foot onto the floor. Good. Now you got out of there without me loosening the crank. And some people can do that. It is best that I back this off about an inch and more easily can get out. Note that as Colleen exited the machine, her left hand was not braced on anything. I recommend that as you exit, that you hold on to the right set of rungs and place your right hand on the back pad. Now, taking this a little further, remember not to blend. If you review the tape, I told her to stand, then I told her to pivot on her feet to the right, then I wanted her to step out of the machine, bringing her left foot through the V and onto the carpet in front of her. Again, do not blend these things. You've just had your back under load. You've just brought some of those structures to a failure, muscularly speaking. And what we would like to have is you stand, nothing else. Do not stand and begin to twist or turn. Then turn. What you will see with time, particularly as the client becomes more confident, instead of stand, then turn, then step out of the machine, the client naturally stands and blends all this into one movement. Do not do that. Separate them. Make them distinct. We have found with this machine, to our surprise, that there are some back conditions that are relieved almost instantly. Not only with the exercise, but sometimes only with loading slowly into the machine. You sometimes will feel some of the vertebrae return to their normal position. They'll actually have a little pops in it. It's quite a relief. Another thing to consider is that as you're doing this motion, you're actually giving nutrition to your spinal disc. Your spinal disc do not have, intervertebral disc, another word for it, they do not have a blood supply. And they get their nutrition by imbibing like a sponge. And by working them like this, they compress and decompress in a healthy way in most situations with most people. Now, we have had people use this machine who have had rods through through two or more vertebrae and have limited motion in that area. And this can be very safely adjusted right up to their limit so that they can flex and extend back and forth within their range that is safe for them, and they have gotten excellent results with it. Now, whenever you're dealing with a medical condition, let's say a back condition, there are several principles that are at stake here that you need to realize. First of all, this machine is not for everybody. We will say that some people get instant relief from a back problem in this. Others don't. Some people are irritated by it. Some people, and in many cases all exhibiting the same symptoms, diagnosed by the same physician, sent to us. Let's say there's 10 of them. 2 of them may get instant relief from this machine. 2 of them may be irritated by it. 2 of them may get instant relief from the other linear spine machine, the extension machine. 2 of them may not get any relief from either machine. Some of them may get relief from this machine only if they do the other machine first and then this one. There's all kinds of different mixes, and these must be looked at and examined in a very conservative way. Now, there's 2 other things to mention here, and these are very, very fundamental principles. Let's say that you've got a condition, and regardless of what that is, the tissue in that area is extremely excitable, right on the edge. Whether it's been acute or a chronic condition, it's on edge. Excitability is it's major quality. Now, you put somebody in this machine or do anything, even if it's the correct thing, even if it's something that's going to help them, it's going to scream. This is why, in some cases, you might want to look at trying to do it more than one time, even if you get an adverse response. After 3 times, I'd give it up. But the first time, I wouldn't be surprised if the body rebels a little bit. But after 2 or 3 times, the body may get to where it's accepting of this, and it doesn't become quite so alarmed. The other point is sort of connected to the first point. Let's say you've got this condition, acute or chronic, you've got this very excitable tissue, and you get in this machine and you get an adverse response. There's 3 interpretations of that. The first and most conservative is that you should not be doing this, okay? The second possible conclusion is that you should be doing this exercise. You found the problem, you isolated, you found something that'll get to it. And the third, and probably more balanced approach, is that you should not be doing this movement or loading now. This is too direct. You should find a more indirect way to get at that problem and gradually hone in, circle around it, and draw more focus toward a more direct approach with time. Now, quite surprising to us, as I said earlier, we built this machine as an abdominal machine. Our first surprise after that, and it wasn't a big surprise, was that it made many people's backs feel better. Their back conditions, sometimes hip problems as well. I've heard all of this information bandied about for years that you need to work your abdominals to have a strong back, those kinds of things. Well, it may be true, but most people have a weak back because they have a weak back. They need a stronger back, not stronger abdominals, and if they strengthen their back, their abdominals will be stronger. The two are all part of the same fuselage. You strengthen one, they work together. Everything will be strengthened if you strengthen the major structures, at least to some degree. But of even greater surprise was an inadvertent discovery by one lady that doing this machine, as she was in a bout of extremely painful menstrual cramps that it would completely remove. And further experimentation showed that this worked for several other women. And eventually, this lady was with me long enough that she became so proficient in this machine that she learned to do the motion off-site, at her office, in her desk chair, in her car, and she could make them go away. Now, many women don't have the problem. Some women have a lesser version of that. Some are completely incapacitated by menstrual cramps at certain times of the month. When this machine is used by someone who knows how to use it, it takes a little time to become proficient with it. It will remove menstrual cramps in most of those women. They don't come back, at least not that month, not that menstrual cycle. Now, the next thing that surprised us was that this machine works the buttocks very hard. Now, as you were doing this motion, the pelvis is being rotated around. We're trying to form that soft letter C, and to do that, we're contracting the abdominals. But as that happens, that soft letter C is also formed by the pelvis rotating backwards. In other words, the hip is extending. One more note here about the buttocks involvement. Over the years, I have heard discussion about abdominal exercise that should be performed without involving the hip flexors. I find this unconvincing. It may be true, I don't know. Most of the time, the physical therapists who have been talking about this often refer to the iliopsoas group. Of course, that's made up of psoas minor and major and iliacus. And they speak as though these are the only hip flexors. They leave out the sartorius. Let's kill that. One more note regarding the involvement of the buttocks muscles. Over the years, I have heard medical people discuss the desirability of an abdominal exercise that does not involve the hip flexors. It has appeared to me that they were primarily focusing upon the iliopsoas group, made up of the psoas minor and major as well as iliacus. And it was as if, again, seemingly to me, that they had disregarded the fact that you've got other hip flexors like the sartorius and the long head of the quadriceps, rectus femoris, in other words. I have found all of this unconvincing. I have seen it swing from arguments that abdominal exercises should exclude the hip flexors to the idea that we need to strengthen the hip flexors, and now we're trying to stretch the hip flexors, and I don't know what the truth is. But if for some reason it is truly desired to exclude the hip flexors in an abdominal exercise, you've come to the right place, because by the sheer evidence that we have intense gluteal, in other words, hip extensor involvement, we have pretty much ruled out the action of hip flexors. They should be neurologically turned off. They have to be. That is being caused by your buttocks and your hamstrings. And it's being done in a very effective way. And mentioning the hamstrings, this becomes a way to sometimes rehab hamstring strains from the opposite end of the muscle, the upper end. Sometimes someone with a hamstring strain or